Hello and welcome to the Krystal Archive Podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Krystal. In this special episode number 35.5, I proudly present to you, at long last, my interview with Estelle Ellis, the original voice actress of Krystal, among other things. We'll get to the interview in just a few seconds, but before that, here's a couple of things to keep in mind as you listen. First, this interview was delayed multiple times. Both the original recording of the interview and the final editing were delayed due to some miscommunications and site issues. So when you hear us talking about the future of Nintendo and Starfox, please remember that this interview was recorded on September 17th, 2012. For perspective, that was just prior to the release of the Nintendo Wii U, prior to the public unveiling of the new Super Smash Bros., and Retro Studios was still rumored to be working on the next Starfox game. We now know that they were actually working on Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Second, we did this interview over Skype with a huge time delay, with Miss Ellis residing in France and I in California. In addition to the occasional sound quality issues, please forgive my sometimes awkward and slow speech, as I was performing the interview at 3 in the morning and was quite tired. Finally, towards the beginning, you will hear a bit of Miss Ellis's newborn son participating in the interview. Though I was able to edit out most of his interruptions, I had to leave a couple in to retain some of Miss Ellis's important dialogue. With those things in mind, please enjoy the interview. Hello everybody. My name is Mr. Krystal, and today we have a very special guest for you all. I'd like to introduce to you Estelle Ellis.
Hello.
Welcome. Estelle Ellis has graciously volunteered to be interviewed for all of you, and we have lots of questions for her. Some of them were submitted by you guys. We also have one other small member here, sort of, on the podcast, if you want to introduce this person.
This is my son Loic. He's 5 months old, and he had to participate in the interview, otherwise I think you'd scream the place down.
All right. So, first of all, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your history, where you're from, and what you were doing prior to your work at Rare, and also any of your work in the educationally, college-wise.
Oh gosh, okay, I'll take you back a long, long way now, because obviously I'm 34 now. Well, initially, okay, this is how it all starts, and you'll understand, I think, if you know anything about Rare. I am originally from Bristol, but Twycross, born and bred. Okay, so anybody who knows about Rare knows that Rare started right in Twycross, and I went from school right in Twycross from the age of about 6 to 18, and I did my A-levels, my GCSEs and everything, and then I went to university in Birmingham, about half an hour down the road, to study modern languages, i.e. French and German with translation studies, and I studied there for 4 years. I did a gap year in France, and then I came back and did a master's in European politics and translation. My goal in life at the time was, is he going to be a problem?
What can I say?
You can be honest.
Well, he suddenly stops making any noise when he hears my voice, I guess.
He's very vocal at the minute. Okay, I'm gonna.
Well, we'll try and go on with.
Can you edit it?
Yes, I can edit it. I'm going to edit the whole thing because I have to put myself back in so that we're interleaved with me asking you the questions.
Okay, sorry. What I might do is I'm gonna pop him down and see if he shuts up.
Okay.
Right. I'm so sorry. He seems to be all right now. I think. Right. So basically, so I did my masters up at Aston University, and initially my main goal was to go and work for the EU up in Luxembourg because I wanted to translate. I was really into European politics. I'm half French, so at the time I was specialising in a lot of the different. It was left wing and right wing politics. Anyway, the extremes, and when I came back during the summer, I obviously needed a job, and living also in Twycross, it being quite a small village, I knew the stampers, and ultimately I just sent my CV in and said, look, is there any work going up at Rare, anything like that? I'll do anything. And luckily for myself, because from the age of about 10 to 14 or 15, I'd done some drama lessons, and I used to go every weekend. I took drama exams. I got several RADA certificates. Anyway, needless to say, I got a phone call basically saying they wanted to call me in to see how I'd get on doing voiceovers. So literally my first experience of Rare was to go in to do voiceovers for Starfox Adventures. And this was only supposed to be a part-time job, Anyway, they said they'd try me out. And I went into the recording studio, and Steve Brandt was there, and Ben Cullum. My first experience, Carol Stamper, bless her, really a legend in her own right. One of my massive icons as a businesswoman. She's definitely up there with one of the people I aspire to be. And she took me into this recording studio and said, here we go, have a go, speak to Ben and Steve, we'll try these lines out and see how you get on. So I think I spent a couple of hours in there with them, came back out, and they said they were happy with me, and it kind of went from there, really. And then I think they offered me a job in the September based on translating. So simultaneously, they allowed me to work on Starfox, so I did some voiceovers on that. Worked with obviously Steve Malpass. There's quite a few of them there. Obviously, my key main workers were Ben Cullum and Steve Brandt, so I'd meet up with them, well, whenever they needed. And then at the same time, I'd work on the Nintendo Game Boy texts to work with Nintendo of Europe to translate all the texting. So it was really weird because it was kind of thrown together. There was no real role description, but at the time I knew that I'd got some text to translate. These were my contacts based in Germany for Nintendo, and I would kind of work between the teams for that. And as well, I'd get a phone call from Steve or Ben at any moment in the day saying, "Oh, can you just come in and read this line for Krystal or for Mother EarthWalker and come in and do it." So it was kind of pretty much off the cuff, and that's how it all worked, because it wasn't about time efficiency or cost effectiveness or anything like that. It was a case of, right, they would just get on with something and suddenly find that if it didn't work, then they'd pull somebody in and get it rectified. So that's where I came along, really, and my life pretty much every day revolved around that.
Before you go on, I wanted to ask, these people you're talking about, Steve Malpass, Ben, what was his name?
Ben Cullum.
Yes, and then there was one other person you mentioned.
Steve Brandt.
Yes, so what were their roles?
Oh, well, Ben Cullum, he was in charge of all the music. Are you familiar with Jamie Cullum?
I'm not.
If you Google him, he's massive in England. He's a jazz player and singer. And Ben is his brother. And I have to say, Ben is exceptionally talented when it comes to the music front, and does a lot of songwriting. And I think he does a lot of Jamie's songwriting. If you Google him, he's very big over here in Europe, particularly in England. And Ben used to be in charge of all the music for Starfox Adventures. He used to do all the recording, used to edit all of the speech and all of the acting and things like that. Steve Brandt, do you know what? It's going back so long. I can't remember what title he was, but he used to actually write all the scripts and create. I think he was a lot to do with the storyline and things like that. But he was the one that used to monitor and tell us whether that sounded right, whether he needed changing, or whether he would amend sort of that kind of side of the game, really. But they were the two main ones when it came to any audio work that we've got to do.
So when you were saying you started out, first of all, with a voice acting role for Krystal and Mother EarthWalker and some other characters in Starfox Adventures as your first game role.
Yes.
But it says with your credits, you've worked with Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Country 2, Saber Wolf, and Banjo-Kazooie, among others. Were those first or during the same time?
Well, do you know what? The Donkey Kong stuff, I only worked on some of the text files. I never actually did any voiceovers on that, so I'm not quite sure where that's come from. Voiceovers that I worked on originally was Starfox Adventures, the first one. I did some for Perfect Dark Zero, but ultimately, because of the hype and the grand scale of the game, I think they actually outsourced the work to professional actors, I think, or even famous ones. I'm not quite sure what happened with that. I did some voiceovers with Grab by the Ghoulies. I don't know whether anybody remembers that. That was probably my favourite game out of all of them because it was proper English, British, tongue-in-cheek stuff, and that was really good. So I worked on that a lot. And I think basically with my credits, I think they kind of mixed a little bit. I think I might have done a tiny bit for Conker's Bad Fur Day, the sequel. But Saberwolf and things like that. Saberwolf, I worked on the translation for the French, you see. So that's probably where it comes in.
Right. I knew it wasn't the voice acting because those games or several of those games don't actually have any voice acting. You're right. So you did most of the text translations?
Yes, for Saberwolf was my first one. Donkey Kong, I think I think I did. Do you know, it's taking me back a while. I think I probably did a little bit, yeah. But obviously, the later titles, I think, because when I turned up, I think I only did it for about 2 years, I think, and then I kind of moved on. It was again very strange. And then obviously, Grabbed by the Ghoulies, I didn't do any of the translation because we handed that over. So yeah, that's kind of a mixture, really. Whatever needed doing, if I could put my hand to it, I would do it.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, hence all the motion capture as well that came along with it, you know. So I'd have a go at anything pretty much, and if it worked, great, and if it didn't, then we'd outsource it or we'd try and find someone else for it.
Interesting. It's very interesting because the Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Country 2 and all those others came out significantly before Starfox Adventures. So were these translations for German-speaking countries and other European countries, or what was the translation you were doing?
For me, it was only French, but because we'd brought it out on the Game Boy Advance, they were kind of they were narrowed down games, weren't they? They were, people loved them so much on the older consoles that they decided to actually bring them down onto the handheld, and
Oh, I see.
and that's what happened. I mean, and again, it was revamping an old story, an old game, and putting it onto the Game Boy. So essentially, everybody was starting from scratch. One of my best friends, Kerry Gunn, she worked a lot on all of the Game Boy Advance graphics, and she did all the Donkey Kong stuff, the Saber Wolf. She was all on those, and essentially you are starting from scratch because obviously you're working with a different engine, you're working with a different piece of hardware, and so that's kind of where I fell into it, trying to organise the data that was needed for Nintendo of Europe translation teams, because obviously they have specific requirements and there are specific regulations that you have to stick to.
Right.
And programmers, designers, artists and things like that aren't really particularly concerned about stuff like that, or they don't really know about the guidelines that they need to adhere to. So I kind of, manage data. If there are any queries or any information that needed, I had to go and liaise in between the team. I mean, I was there, you see, so it was so much easier just to get in the lift, go down the stairs and get into one of the barns and speak to one of the artists or one of the programmers, and then go back, as opposed to spending X amount of time sending emails back and forth and phone calls.
You were also the motion capture actress for Joanna Dark in Perfect Dark Zero.
Yeah, I was.
Could you tell us a little something about that experience?
Do you know what? I thoroughly enjoyed it. I used to enjoy it because, again, we all used to work as a team, but we were all really good friends as well because everybody knew everybody, and particularly me. I'm quite a people person, so I knew pretty much all of the teams and I knew everybody. And an afternoon with Gary Talbot and Jonathan Mummery, was a day out the office. Yes, granted, sometimes they'd have to stick me in these, like this, almost like a morph suit, and pin UV balls all over me at all my joints and my hips and everywhere else, and get me running around a pitch black room with infrared lamps everywhere. But again, it was an experience and it was good fun, and it was funny to see my motion capture, my movements, my walk, my jump, my run on Kevin Bayliss's computer, and then him sticking, Joanna Dark on me, and and everything else. That was really quite funny. But all in all, the experience was, it was fun. It was fun.
So, Starfox Adventures was your first voice acting role. Could you tell us a little bit about the experience acting for Starfox Adventures specifically and other voice acting in general?
Well, do you know what? It's the first time that I'd ever been given a kind of a script where I was sat in a studio and they'd give me the headphones and I'd have three lines. And they'd be right. Okay, let's try different voices. And it was really difficult because obviously, yes, they kind of show you a part of the game. Bearing in mind, everything was still in development. The graphics weren't full. It was all really kind of weird. So you had to kind of get your head round the context of a particular scene. And also trying to get to know the character as well, because it was really odd, because at one point I thought, well, does she need to sound American? Does she need to sound foreign? Does she need to sound Eastern European or English? So I suppose it was difficult for me to kind of identify with the character, and also because the guys weren't quite sure what they were looking for. So that in itself was a learning curve. But ultimately, Krystal ended up with an English accent like me, and I don't know. I kind of went down all right, and it seemed like the best thing. And the odd thing is when I was speaking her language, a lot of my French was coming out as well, which seemed a bit weird, but the guys liked it, so it worked, and that was it. And it was kind of trial and error. I mean, it wasn't specifically organised. There weren't any real, proper guidelines, as in you have to do it this way and you have to sound, you just sit there, and it was literally, let's just try it out and see what works. And that's kind of how it went with pretty much anything they got me to say in the studio.
So, when you were doing these lines, were you doing them with other voice actors typically, or was it usually just by yourself?
Always by ourselves, and the problem is, again, the company couldn't afford to take people out. I mean, Steve Malpass, as an example, obviously was Fox McCloud, but he had other really important roles in the game. It just so happened that he was good at that, and they wanted to use his voice. So while I was doing this, we couldn't have Steve out of the office, waiting around doing that just to throw a couple of lines at me, you see. So sometimes they'd show me, or they'd make me hear one of his recordings that I would need to work with, that they would in the end put together. That's pretty much all that I'd get. So no, it was always on my own. And then obviously you'd get Ben or Steve, and they were rubbish at lines, try and say, oh, why don't you say it like this? And anyway, but yeah, ultimately it was on my own, and you kind of had to figure out what was best, really. And in the end, I think, I personally knew when it kind of felt right, because when you do certain lines, you realise, oh God, that was awful. It's like that, and then other times you think, yeah, I think that kind of works, and they all agree. And then they edit it, and then it fits in quite nicely. So it was kind of the blind leading the blind, and a trial and error, so to speak.
You say Steve Malpass was working on other things besides his voice acting roles. What other things did he do?
Oh God, do you know what? I can't remember, but he was. I think he was an artist as well. So he did quite a few bits. And again, this coming back to Rare wanted to use all of their resources that they currently got there in house. So Steve at the time I think he was a graphic designer, so he did a lot of the features on the scenery. I think it was. But don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. So any voice acting was secondary, and it was the same with Louise Ridgway, who is now Louise Connor, who's I think the art director there now, still a good friend of mine, and she used to pop in, even though she was an artist, an animator, they would still rope her in to do voices for, Conquer's Bad Fur Day and things like that.
That's very interesting. I didn't realize that that there was so much of a role sharing there at Rare, particularly Steve Malpass, who I don't think anyone knew was an artist until now, although I could very well be wrong on that one.
Well, have a look. Again, there's information that, I mean, I'm sure if we dug out, I mean, he's currently he moved from where he's now living in Wales, and he's a photographer. And again, just proves, how people move on and how they kind of move away and things like that, how we kind of branch out. But yeah, definitely. And the thing is with Rare is everything was very, very private, and we were all like one massive family, and it was really difficult to kind of, yes, there was a lot of, NDAs going on, and it was all about, discretion, and it was all secret, and it had to be kept under wraps. But it was also a case of, I don't say outsiders weren't welcome, that's not it, but we were all very close knit. So if there was a way that we could cope, all of us, and get the job done all together, then that's how we would do it, and we wouldn't outsource to anybody that we might not necessarily trust, if that makes sense. And it made for a great team. It made for the best team, really, and it also meant that we all kind of cared about what we did. And in those days, that's what it was. Everybody had a passion. They loved it. They got, rightfully rewarded for it, but it was all something that everybody, took pride in, and it was a massive team thing, I think. And that's why, look, if we can do it, we'll find someone, and if we can't, as a last measure, we'll get somebody else in from outside. But that never used to happen. They were happy, and ultimately the final decisions were always made by Tim and Chris. If they weren't happy with something, then we changed it. But there was never one thing that they turned around and said, no, that wasn't good enough, or no, that's the wrong choice, or they were always very supportive in anything that we kind of put together.
So you mentioned earlier that you had kind of you put a little bit of your French accent and French speaking into the use of the Dino language, the fictional language that they put at the beginning of Starfox Adventures for several characters. Could you talk about working with a fictional language and what the process was like?
Well, do you know what? It kind of came about. It was a very strange one, because obviously there was no, like I said, there was no set brief on anything like that. Now, bearing in mind, obviously there was a proper pattern for this that Steve had created, so you could actually go back if you were that passionate about it and create your own sentences using the structures of this made up language. So of course he just sent me these lines, and it'd be a case of reading it out and obviously getting your tongue around these letters and words and things like that. Steve had come in with a script, and there'd be 3 or 4 lines. He slightly described the scene to me, bearing in mind it hadn't even been sort of finished. It was, right, Krystal's on the back of this massive animal, and she drops her spear, and this is what she says. So this is kind of the direction that I used to get. So you'd see this language and you'd be like, right, okay, so first of all, how would you say it in English, i.e., oh God, whatever it was that needed to come out. And then you had to then use that kind of expression to this gobbledygooky weird language that had just been given to you. So I sat there, and then okay, once we'd got the intonation right, it was a case of, right, how is she going to sound? So of course, and you go through everything, don't you? You try all the Eastern European, because she was very feline and quite attractive. So we tried that, and obviously I was rubbish at that. And then we did sort of another accent, and then in the end I kind of, with everything for me, if I kind of, with my German, even though I'm really English, as soon as I start speaking a foreign language, I have that French accent to it, and they kind of liked it, and we ultimately decided that, yeah, let's just use that. It's kind of got that French intonation, and we kind of ran with it. The difficult part for that, obviously, is depending on what kind of day I was having, and because you didn't record everything in one day. It was always a case of 3 or 4 lines here and there over the space of several weeks and months. So you had to remember which kind of accent you'd used initially, and then you had to remember that and then apply it to everything else, as well as getting to grips with each sentence and the kind of the expressions and the acting needed for that. So it was difficult. I mean, it was really enjoyable, but there were so many things to get right, because obviously it was all about consistency, and as a character, you didn't want to sound French one day, and then suddenly, I'm having a different day today, and sound slightly Spanish or Russian. So that's kind of how we did it. But as it transpires, it worked out quite well, and I don't think we had any complaints. Well, Tim and Chris didn't complain anyway, so we were all right with that then.
Yes, I've spent a significant amount of time listening to the audio, particularly for the fictional language parts, where you and other characters are speaking in Dino, for the purposes of trying to make a translator that will correctly give you the correct pronunciation in that form. And I've noticed in particular that when you're playing as Krystal, you roll your R's, whereas the other characters do not. So I think that might be part of the French hint that you're talking about.
Yes. And that also shows an example how none of us actually conferred and said, right, this is the way you actually want to speak the Dino language. I think everybody just went off and did their own thing, and there, there in itself shows the difference.
Well, it certainly the lines you came up with and how you delivered them were very good. I would say, even though you were dealing with the difficulty of this language that doesn't exist and you've never learned. So, particularly some of your lines and General Scales lines at the very beginning were very emotionally charged.
Thank you. But to be fair, again, and on a side note, because obviously it was the ultimate, the first scenes of the game, you had to get it right. And I think obviously because I think it was the first scripts that I'd been given at the time, you kept going over and over and over and over, and obviously after time you get used to it and things come a lot easier for you. But the importance of the first scene and trying to get to grips with the language, made for a lot of practicing, a lot of scrapping of stuff, but ending in the right language and the right intonation, I suppose. So yeah, so I'm glad you approve anyway.
So you said that your first role was this at Rare was actually working on Starfox Adventures. Now, Starfox Adventures was originally another game, Dinosaur Planet, an N64 game with basically the same story, but it was not a Star Fox game at the time. Were you part of the team before or during or after that transition, and uh, or do you know anything about that?
No idea. As I said, I mean, I'm not a gamer. I'm sorry, everybody, but I'm not an avid gamer. I think I probably would be, but I'm really rubbish at games, and that goes for everything, any kind of game. So when I came in absolutely blind, and obviously I was offered this job. Let's try it out, and I'd got absolutely no idea. My friend had got a GameCube, and we kind of had the odd game on there. That was it. So to be fair, I've got absolutely no knowledge of the previous game. I mean, I know that obviously there's a cult following. There always has been, and it was always kind of that niche game where there was reason to kind of introduce a new version or a sequel. Which is why sort of Rare was so excited about the whole thing. Um, I don't think I realised quite what was going on at the time when I was in the thick of it. All of it a bit overwhelming, but also I didn't appreciate what I was taking part in at the time. So no, I had no involvement at all with any of the previous.
Well, could you tell me, if you can remember, what was the year you were hired at Rare? That can maybe tell us something.
I think it would have been 2002 or 2003. I think I started university at 96, graduated 2000, then did another one 2001. So yeah, it would probably have been about 2001 or 2002 is when I would have started.
Wow. So you were indeed right at the end of it.
Yes.
That explains. Okay, so that explains some things where we've seen some trailers from the game before it became Star Fox Adventures, and it seemed like maybe the voice for Krystal was a different person, but we weren't sure. And now I can say pretty confidently it probably was not you. It was someone else because you were. That would have been after the transition occurred, 2001, 2002.
Yes, that's right.
Can you tell me a bit about what your experience was like working in the game industry, Rare in particular, and what your typical day was like, what your coworkers were like?
Okay, what a typical day. There was no, and again, that's the beauty of the gaming industry. Anybody who works in it, yes, it's work really hard, but it's play hard as well. And I think because it's such it's a young industry, and it's, you know, it's like the movies, isn't it? It's not like you're selling radiator caps or, you know, anything really boring. It's it's full of really artistic people, who are exceptionally creative, you know, loads of personality, loads of imagination. So of course, everybody that we worked with, not only did we get on with them really well, but everybody was kind of really special in their own right, because um, there was no restraints, and the theory at Rare was, yes, you know, everybody had to get their heads down. There was no mobile phones, there was no radio, there was no, you know, and you started work at 9, you had your 1 hour lunch, there was no internet surfing. Well, there wasn't really at the time anyway when I first started, but no one was really allowed to do anything like that. It was all about work, but it was also about nurturing the talents that these people had got. And back in those days, I mean, you know, the, again, I don't think you appreciated the kind of the talented people that you were surrounded by, and the gifts and the talents they've got. I mean, most of them now sort of moved on, but, you know, onto bigger and better things, and kind of started their own businesses, developing games themselves, you know, or have kind of, you know, sold up and gone. But in those days, you know, you'd get to work and you would turn up all at the same time, you know, and in those days, you know, you'd see the Ferraris turning up, or the Porsche, or the, you know, the Lotuses, and everybody, you know, would turn up. And you could turn up in your tracksuit bottoms and your trainers. A favourite of mine, you know, jeans and Ugg boots, and you know, there was no dress code. You turn up, you'd log in at 9 o'clock. There was a small computer. You'd put your fob against it, and that was it. You'd be registered, and not so that people could keep tabs on you or anything like that, but obviously it was just a way of ensuring that everybody was in, and for fire purposes and emergency purposes and things like that. So we all walked in. Sometimes you'd go and get a coffee in the canteen. You know, we had a lovely canteen. The views were amazing from every office. Um, and then everybody got their head down. And for me, I'd go in. I used to have my desk right opposite Carol Stamper, and I used to get on with um, my text files, carry on, you know, and then your day kind of varied, because depending on what needed to be done, you might get the phone call from Ben saying, "Can you just come into the recording studios for 10 minutes? I need you to run through this line again. You know, I've done it wrong. I've deleted it. It's rubbish. You need to try again, or we've changed the line." So you'd literally get up and run into the studio, you know, and you might see Kurt Cope or Robin Beanland, you know, the old legends that they are, and you'd go and do your line with Steve or whoever was in there. I spent a lot of time with Duncan Botwood as well, who, again, they're all legends. You know, I can say so many nice things about them. I don't have anything bad to say about any of those guys, because they were amazing, and they were lovely to spend time with as well. I was really lucky to work with people that talented and that lovely. So and you'd come back and you'd go and have your lunch, or you'd go and make tea for everybody, and then, you know, nothing specific, you know, you just get on with it. And then at 5 o'clock, everybody would make a mad dash. You'd all queue up and log out with your pass, and then all the Ferraris and the Porsches would take off again and drive home, and then the same would happen again, you know. Yeah, it was great, you know, and twice a year they'd organise a Christmas party. They do bonfire night. I don't know whether you guys are familiar with the 5th of November. And it's a case of fireworks, bonfire. But with Rare, you know, they did everything just the same as the games. They would do everything properly. So you'd have a massive bonfire, you'd have a massive marquee, and they'd put a spread on for everybody and loads of drinks, or everything was free. And then at Christmas, you'd have the most amazing Christmas parties that, you know, just balloons everywhere, and just free drink, free food, just live bands. I mean, you know, as you can imagine. And basically that kind of encapsulates how it was like working there, because yes, there was an element of routine, because yes, you know, you had to go in at a certain time and you had to go and do your job and things like that, but I couldn't possibly describe one day, because they were all completely different, you know, and you spent time with different people and different ideas, and then sometimes, you know, Tim Stamper would come over and he'd have some crazy idea, and he'd say, right, Google this, let's see what we could do with this, and then I think I remember Pinata. I mean, they were thinking about doing a game for that, and Tim came in and, right, your translator, I want this in Spanish, what's this, don't try and Google it, don't tell anyone, and he'd have this mad idea, and then it would either transpire later down the line, or it wouldn't, you know. But anyway, so that's kind of, and it was exciting because you never quite knew what was going on. So yeah, that was me reminiscing.
Thank you for that. We're gonna go back a little bit towards the Starfox specific, and I have a few questions about Krystal, your first role. So we all want to know, how do you feel about Krystal as a character, and if you share any of her traits?
I think it'd be big-headed of me to say yes, I'm a total minx, and I did. You know what? As a character, when I saw her, I thought, God, I thought she was lovely. I thought she was amazing, and no, I'm not a massive actress or anything like that. But I think when you've dealt with drama and you're given something, and it's up to you to kind of give that character life. I saw her and kind of, seeing the graphics and the ideas and the context that I was given in which she was in. I kind of thought, yeah, she's feisty, she's catty, she's attractive. I think, yeah, you can have a bit of fun with this. So in terms of personality traits, I think, yes, I'm probably quite feisty, and I'd probably try and battle a few dinosaurs myself if I was given the chance. But yeah, I'd say, well, look at it this way: I'd relate to her far more easily than I could the Mother EarthWalker. Put it that way.
That's a good response, I'd say. Now, Krystal has a rather significant cult following on the internet. There are several websites about her, and she's the frequent subject of artists and writers, people writing fan fictions and drawing fan art. And also, of course, there's my website, which has been running for some almost 7 years now, devoted just to this secondary character, basically. Does it surprise you that she, as a secondary character, would be so popular, and what's your reaction to her popularity?
Do you know what? Nothing really surprises me in game. I think. Do you know what? I think it's really nice, and that a character like her has generated so much attention and such a following, because there are a lot of people out there who would, obsess about the main characters in Gears of War, and things like that. So I kind of like the idea that there are people out there who are interested and who want to follow a character like that. And I know who I'd rather follow, but then again, that's me, but the thing is, she's an amazing character, and from the Nintendo days, and everybody will admit that Nintendo was always amazing at those kind of titles. And I think if anyone was going to create a title like that, it was going to be Nintendo. And you just look at Mario and all of the characters involved in those kind of titles, and they have a massive cult following. So I'm not surprised, but I'm pleased to have been involved in it, and I kind of like to think that I had a tiny bit of that to do with that. I think it's lovely.
Before we get to some different questions, you've voiced her and several other characters, and I was wondering if you would like to take the opportunity here to do some voices for her or any other characters you feel like, and possibly some different accents, just to show off your vocal talents.
Oh, no.
Am I putting you on the spot?
Yeah, I didn't sign up for it. No, that's fine. I'm just trying to think. Do you know what? I would, yeah, well, I suppose I can't really do anything off the top of my head. I'm just trying to think. It's so long ago since I even did anything to do with Krystal, so I don't know whether I'd be able to replicate her voice now. I suppose if I listened to her again, I might.
Actually, you know what? Let's just skip that for now. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put you on the spot like that. We'll just skip that for now, okay?
Okay.
So, as you're aware, and some of our longtime Krystal Archive readers know, we've been planning to do this interview since sometime December 2007, about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But life kept getting in the way. Now, back then, when you first agreed to the interview, everyone was ecstatic, and including myself, and I wanted to get the community to submit some questions for you. And here's a few of the questions they submitted. So these are just questions from people on various sites, mine and some other Starfox sites.
Okay. Yeah.
So, first question. Do you have any lines of dialogue that you wished were different or would redo if you were given the chance? And any favorite lines?
I think coming back to the first scene, and again, I know obviously everybody, thought that it was apt or it was fine, and that everything, again, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I think looking back, going through the game as it was at the time, thinking you could actually tell that it was me trying to get into character first, and gradually throughout the game, I think I ease into the character, and I feel more comfortable with the language. So looking back now, given the opportunity, if someone would say, "Do you want to have a go at doing it again?" I probably would try again. Not that maybe people didn't notice. Obviously, they probably haven't noticed. But for me, I think the first or the opening line, I think I would probably try again. But then, yeah, I think everybody would choose to do something again, wouldn't they? Really, given the opportunity.
One would hope. Do you now favorite lines? You said that the getting it just perfectly right. So I assume some of your favorite lines would have been after that first line when you were having your emotionally filled dialogue with General Scales. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, and in fact, I think, and bearing in mind, obviously, it's been so long, and as I said, because I'm so rubbish at gaming, you can imagine how often it used to take me to get to the end of the game. I think I've obviously just seen the end properly probably about 2 or 3 times, but I do remember the last line with Fox McCloud, there being that little bit of a flirt, and it was an English line, and I do actually remember enjoying it because I remember, I think Steve Malpass was there as well. But anyway, it was that swooning kind of, oh, flirty, oh, you're my hero kind of thing, and I do remember enjoying that. And I think even now, if I was to get a link, if someone was to send me a link, please, to that line, I'd probably enjoy it. Having said that, I probably could. I don't know.
I can help you out, no problem on that one.
Brilliant. From what I remember, I think that was one of my favourite ones because it was just so corny, and it was just, well, yeah, I think the end to a romance, because hey, everybody likes a romance, even if it isn't a game. So
Right. Oh, you're absolutely right. It is very, very corny. I'm sure you'll laugh your head off once you see it again.
oh dear.
Okay. Next question from the fans. Would you like to do the voice of Krystal again? And if so, would you change anything about the performance?
Would I would do her voice again in a different game. Um,
Right.
Not sure I'd want to do it all over again, if that makes sense.
Not the same game.
No, I think if they brought out a new version, if Rare decided, or well, obviously not Rare now, but if somebody, some developer decided to do it again, I would definitely be interested in doing it. Um, I don't think I'd choose to do it again because obviously, it was a success. It was done. It's done and dusted. That's part of obviously why people like it so much. I wouldn't want to change that.
So you want to move on to new things,
Yeah,
but the same
definitely.
character.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
She might be a bit older. She might be a little bit stiffer when she gets off her dinosaur. But yeah, it'd be quite nice.
The next question is about not specifically about Krystal, but if you were given a chance to voice any character from any series, or act any character, in real life, as yourself, as an actor, not just a voice actress.
Yeah.
Do you have any character in mind that you would like to portray?
Do you know what? I will openly admit this. When I did the voiceovers for Joanna Dark for Perfect Dark Zero, I was so excited because I thought, yes, this is brilliant. And to be fair, I'd done the motion capture, so any of the rendered scenes, that was me. And I kind of thought it would be great to put the voice along with. So ultimately, it could be me. Okay, I don't look like her. But so when I started doing it, I was really excited about it, and I thought, yeah, I could probably get my teeth stuck into this, bit of James Bond, like, the English accent. I could really see myself getting into that. Unfortunately, obviously, they chose to go down a different route. But out of anything now, Joanna Dark would be the one that I would choose to do a voiceover if I had just choice of one person over anything at all. I think that would be it.
Well, I think that might also answer our next question, which is, if you could be any character with all of their powers and abilities, who would you become?
Yeah, probably Joanna Dark, really, I think. No, I just don't like Wonder Woman. Mind you, my hair, and probably as old as she is now anyway, but no, I can't see wanting to be any other superhero. I'm a mum, and that's a superhero. Does that count?
It does in my book.
Yes, great, good answer.
You mentioned that you were not so much of a gamer, but have you played through any of the Starfox games and any other sort of games you enjoy? I know you're using an iPad right now. Do you do any gaming on that?
No, not really. My 5-year-old is better at it than me. I think. Do you know what? Yes, I used to game a lot, and this will probably tie into probably a conversation you want to have with me later. But I used to really enjoy Tekken, and this will tie into obviously what I'm doing now with my cats with the Street Fighter versus Tekken and everything else. So in those days, I used to really like it. I still quite like it now. I'm rubbish, but I do like the effects of a good Street Fighter versus Tekken game when you've had a stressful day or half an hour lunch break and you have a go on your fight stick. I think that's enjoyable. I am rubbish, I have to say, but I've never been an avid gamer, and I think unfortunately the luxury that I had at Rare was that if I needed to go through a game, I'd just go and see one of the testers, and they within moments, they'd get me to wherever it is I needed to be, and also bearing in mind they test the game, they'd record it for me, so I could just quickly rewind it and get to where it is I wanted to be. So it kind of took the fun out of gaming, but it was easy for me to access certain things because I'd got people that were just amazing on games. Why would I waste 3 hours of my time trying to get somewhere when I could go downstairs and see David Wong, Andy Kimberley, the old crew, and they'd kind of get me to the stage without a problem at all. And all I do is give them a chocolate bar or something, or a cup of tea.
So you like fighting games then?
Yes, a little bit feisty. Yes, I quite like them. Particularly in the work that I'm doing now, Street Fighter and Tekken are massive for us, and I go to quite a few of the Fight Club events in London with all of the gaming tournament guys. So yeah, I quite like it. I like everything about the fighting games. That obviously doesn't stem from my experience at Rare, but I think that kind of just comes gradually through my teenage years and obviously starting to work at Mad Cats.
I'm sorry, but it sounds like you actually are a gamer. You just don't realize it.
Yeah, I'm just not a very good one. That's all.
No one can blame you for not having any particular skills. I'm not particularly good at games either, but like you, I love them. What about Starfox specifically? Have you played through Adventures at all, or did you just watch the testers go through it?
No, I have played through it because obviously, when it was my first game that had been published, and with Rare, bless them, they were so good that every time you had a game that was published, you got a free copy. So they would give you a copy of this game, and of course, you go home and show your friends and family and everything else. So of course, yes, I used to play through it. I mean, sometimes. And I don't know whether you get this or anybody else in the industry gets this. It's a great excuse to play a computer game. Sometimes my bosses, they end up having a go at Pro Evo or FIFA. And Call of Duty is a massive one at the moment. Obviously, we sell headsets for that, and we have to go through the games and test them during our lunch break because it is essential. And oh, Mr. Krystal, I've forgotten what I was saying. What was your question?
It was a question about playing through Starfox Adventures.
Sorry. No. So yes, I have done it in the past. So gradually, when you get a new game, you do have to play through it, and I have done it several times. I don't think I've got quite to the end, but yes, I've gone through it, and then what it's like. Sometimes you'll get somebody else to help you go through it, and then once I can get through it, I'll carry on. So I have done, probably not from start to finish completely on my own, but yes, I have played it.
Yeah, that last hour or so in Starfox Adventures is pretty tough. It just jumps up in difficulty right towards the end. So I don't blame you at all for not getting past that part. As we were talking earlier, and admittedly, when we scheduled this interview originally, it was not the case. But now you and I are both members of the game industry, kind of an exclusive club, so to speak. I was wondering if you could tell us your opinion on where you see gaming going as a whole in the future.
Wow, I think it's going to still be massive. Excuse me. I think it's ever growing. I think it's all going to end up downloadable, and I think it's from my experience in the last 10 years, I think they'll end up being the massive players, i.e. there'll be EA, there'll be Ubisoft, there'll be MGS. We've already started seeing, the smaller developers and publishers kind of disappear, and I do generally think that you will end up having sort of you big giants in gaming, and they will churn out massive titles along the lines of Gears of War and Call of Duty and things like that, and I think it's a massive part of everybody's life. And I think originally gaming was kind of, I'm not saying it was underworld or anything like that, but look at the PC side of gaming as well. I mean, that essentially has been massive. Nobody realizes that it was as big as it was. It's all been kind of underworld, and it's not mainstream. And now gradually you're starting to see World of Warcraft and things like that. Titles are suddenly coming mainstream, and gaming is becoming a massive part of people's lives, and you can see that through the recession. People are still spending their money, but they're spending it more wisely, and they're going for the massive titles that we're seeing at the moment, and that will only ultimately feed the giants in the industry. I don't think for one second there's going to be any kind of demise at all or anything like that. I think it will only just turn into some kind of 3D effect, some kind of real time, I mean, they're already starting to kind of do that anyway, but I think there's a lot left in the gaming industry, yet to be seen, definitely. And you can see that by the next generation consoles that are coming out.
The next question from the fans is kind of unrelated, but I'll ask it anyway, and it's what's your favorite musical genres and performers?
Oh wow. Do you know what? I'm excuse me. I'm a real dance music girl. I love I love Ibiza. I love anything to do with sort of head candy or anything like that. Not quite sure whether anybody's familiar with head candy over in the States, but it's a massive music title, a bit like Ministry of Sound. So that's kind of my mainstream music. If I sit down and listen to anything, it'll be your head candy dance music, which is a bit kind of vanilla, dancey, trancey music. In terms of musical artists, I really like Adele, and English bands. I'd probably say Coldplay. But again, it kind of depends on what mood I'm in, and I think that's pretty applies to everybody, doesn't it? Really.
Right.
I'm pretty mainstream, really. I don't have a genre, i.e. rock, heavy metal, grunge, or anything like that. I like a bit of drum and bass sometimes, but that again depends on what kind of mood I'm in.
Well, dance is a genre, and that's cool that you have that, because I don't see that as people being people's favorite genre very often. It's one of my favorites, so good for you.
Good taste.
All right, this is the last question from the fan community. It's kind of an embarrassing one. I hate to ask it, but I was forced by a long-time Fox McCloud fangirl to ask you this question. Okay? So prepare to groan on this one.
Okay.
She asks, what was it like working with Steve Malpass, and was he as sexy as Fox McCloud himself?
Okay, I have to tread very carefully on this question because I was very good friends with his girlfriend at the time, and I'll tell you a quick little story. we all used to go out, and we all used to be friends, basically. At Rare, we were all quite close-knit. My best friend now I know through Mark Bettridge, and at the time we were friends with Tanya and Steve. And so in response to that, it's a bit weird because I never really saw Steve in that light, but he's Welsh. So from an English girl, that well, it's a bit of a statement, but he's Welsh, and he had strawberry blonde hair, and he had an amazing sense of humour, and he still has it probably. Obviously, I'm not in touch with him as much as I used to be, but he's a very, very funny guy. So in terms of being sexy, I never really saw him that way, but he would definitely make us laugh. So I suppose that was an element of attractiveness, I suppose. So probably not what she wanted to hear, but that's what it is.
Well, good answer as far as I'm concerned. Well, that covers the questions for the community. So I have a couple more questions for you before we finish up the interview. If I've done my homework correctly, and you've mentioned as much during the interview, you've since moved on from Rare to work at Mad Catz Europe as a manager?
Yep, I'm a national account manager.
So could you tell us what prompted the change to move from Rare to another company? And
as you mentioned earlier, you kind of excuse me, you saw there are a lot of changes after Microsoft came and acquired Rare. And I think at the time I'd been working there for about 3 or 4 years. And in your career as you start, it wasn't a path that I'd chosen. I'd been thrown into it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was great. And I was really fortunate to be given that opportunity. But another one arose in the form of sales for Mad Catz. Now, Mad Catz originated in Canada, then obviously branched out to San Diego, and they'd got obviously an American affiliate office over there, but they were looking to branch out into Europe. So for me, it was an opportunity to actually start with a really small team over in Europe to basically penetrate the European market. And it was still in the gaming industry. Obviously, it was accessories, but again, here I was allowed to actually sell products and probably be catapulted more into the gaming industry as such, because obviously at Rare you're stuck there, you're developing, you don't actually get to see that many people, whereas with the sales team I actually managed to opportunity to go out and meet other people, i.e. other publishers, retailers as well, and still sell products that were close to my heart and close to the industry that all I'd ever known, and I'd kind of decided that that's what I wanted to do and that's where I needed to be. And I still feel that way now. That the industry's great, and I can't imagine kind of leaving it, really, not unless something amazing came up. But so that's kind of why I decided to leave Rare.
Could you expand a bit about the whole transition shortly after Starfox Adventures came out, or I think it was actually the day that it came out? Microsoft officially acquired Rare. Can you talk about the transition as being bought and what all was going on during that time?
The transition was very odd because we knew that big things were coming, because obviously we had the privilege of Steve Ballmer coming to visit us. And I think when all this kind of stuff started happening, I think we realised that everybody needed to step up their game, i.e. not as in their talents or anything like that, but needing to hit deadlines, needing to be more proactive, needing to be a little bit more driven, because obviously Microsoft, you're dealing with a massive giant here who've got different expectations, whereas Nintendo, I think, were far better at letting us get on with it. Do you know what I mean? So of course the work ethic kind of changed, and people began to struggle with that.
Thank you for that perspective, and I would like to ask now if you have any tips for aspiring voice actors and actresses, or anyone else wishing to enter the game industry in general.
Okay, aspiring voice actors for the gaming industry, all I'd say is good luck, because I think the way games are going now, you're suddenly going to find that they're going to recruit celebrities to do voices, and I do remember with the Joanna Dark out of Perfect Zero, they were looking at recruiting some American celebrity to do voiceovers. So I think personally it's going to get harder and harder to do it, especially for someone like me who had the odd certificate, but I didn't really have any kind of other qualifications, or any experience in that way. I think times have changed too much now. For anyone who wants to get into the gaming industry, again, it's getting more and more competitive, and more people want to be part of it. So, as you said, if you want it hard enough and badly enough, I think you really need to try. So it's all about the graft, really.
The graft?
The graft, yeah, the hard work.
Ah, English expressions. I apologize.
Yes, sorry, grafting to work.
Got it. All right, and lastly, I'd like to ask a little bit about what's next for you. What do you see your future like? Obviously, you're still working in the game industry and you love it at Madcaps. Do you have any future plans, and what are you looking forward to?
Me, I'm very happy at Mad Cats. I love Mad Cats. I love what I do, and like I said, I love the industry. So if I ever did anything, I think my ultimate job would be to go and work for EA. I think, and and I'm sure people at Mad Cats wouldn't mind me saying that. I mean, this is not me saying I would or I'm going to or anything like that. I think in my dreams, I think I'd like to go and do something for them. I mean, they're a massive company. I know a lot of people there, and it's good fun. But I think I'm not saying I am at where I need to be or where I want to be, but I kind of think that the whole Triton headset thing with Mad Cats, the Call of Duty licenses and other licenses that Mad Cats have got. I like to think that in a few years, I'll be higher up in the ladder, part of the UK office than I am now. So probably quite boring in terms of aspirations, but not leaving the industry is probably my main goal, really. But again, you just don't know, and I'm always open to opportunities, and so that, yeah, I think that's me.
That's interesting that you say that you would love to work with EA because, I mean, that's who I work for. I mean, you're right. Absolutely. I agree that there are few more interesting characters than those people you find working on games in the game industry.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, with that, that's all the questions I have for you. Do you have any questions for me before we end this interview? Or?
Yeah, okay. With this whole Krystal thing, and obviously you've hosted this website and there's a cult following. How do you see, or how does everybody see this cult following for Krystal going? Is it the kind of Mario thing that you can see throughout the years? Because obviously now we're going to be hitting a generation as we grow older where at some point there'll be 50, 60, maybe 70-year-olds who'll be, massive Call of Duty fans. Will there be the 70-year-old who'll be a massive Starfox Adventures fan?
Obviously, it's not on the same plane, I think, because Call of Duty is a mass market thing that it seems like everybody is playing. Whereas Starfox Adventures had a very modest, by comparison, sell rate for the game. I've had the interesting experience where I've been playing Star Fox games for a long time, and Star Fox Adventures I've found recently, just in the last year, people will email me and say that Star Fox Adventures was their very first video game, which surprises me because it's it's 10 years, and I was playing video games 10 years before that, at least.
Yeah.
So I think that. The same thing that attracted us initially to Krystal is still attracting people today. When it, as I said, that was their first game, so they still like her. I personally think that Star Fox is a major license of Nintendo, like Mario and Zelda and
yes,
Metroid. Maybe not quite as big as the big three, but
yeah.
It's certainly big enough to where they're not going to kill it anytime soon.
Okay.
So I hold out a lot of hope that they'll bring it back as a new game, preferably soon on the new Wii U that was just
yes, due out November, isn't it?
Right. And I personally think it's Retro Studios. No one knows what they're working on right now, but they've been working in secret for about a year on some game.
Yeah.
And they said, quote, "It's the game that everybody wants us to make."
Right. There you go. Mm.
Right, and we also know that it's not Zelda from other things they've said, so
okay,
it's something else.
Wow, interesting times.
Yeah. The real question, though, I think, is, are they going to? This this is scary to say, but it's a distinct possibility that they may go back and say Adventures didn't happen and start over again, like they did with Star Fox 64. Could be. I mean, you never know, right?
No, of course.
But that would effectively be the end of Krystal, unfortunately.
Oh dear. Well, we'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and there's of course the next Smash Brothers game, and everybody's hoping that Krystal will be in that.
That would be nice. I'd like to see that.
And that's a fighting game, so you would probably enjoy that immensely.
Yes. I think I probably would. I think I'd probably go out and buy that. Or try and get someone to send me a free copy.
I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day to talk to us, the fans, and answer our questions. It's been a tremendous pleasure to speak with you, Miss Ellis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krystal. Thanks.